Inflation data raised up to 5.95% in September. Based on your September outlook for Asia-Pasifik, Indonesia average inflation in 2022 is 5%. On the other hand, our government's inflation target is under 5% for the whole year 2022. Do you think it is realistic?
So with the recent increases in fuel prices across Indonesia, we do expect that headline inflation numbers will start to tick higher. Bank Indonesia has become proactive in terms of tightening monetary policy to make sure that inflation expectations remain anchored. But we do expect that inflation through this year will average 5%, and next year we expect it to be even higher than that at 6.2%. Just given the push from the energy side, but also the recovering economy will likely put some upward pressure on core inflation as well. So these will be inflationary factors. We do expect that inflation will be slightly higher next year, and something that the central banks are also watching quite closely. Food inflation globally, I just want to quickly point out, is also a concern, which is one of the reasons why we expect Asia-Pacific inflation in general to be slightly higher over the next few months.
So you say below 5% is non-realistic, or doesn't make any sense?
I would not put it that way. I think if we exclude the effect of energy prices, then inflation in Indonesia has been significantly controlled relative to the rest of APAC. What we have seen is core consumer prices remaining below the 3% year-on-year inflation mark for much of the course of the year, which is significant at a time when global inflationary pressures are running quite hot. In Indonesia, we've also seen domestic inflationary pressures outside of food remaining fairly contained as well through much of the year. So it's really only the increase in the energy segment which is driving the headline number a little bit higher. So if we exclude that one very specific factor, then inflation remains broadly contained overall.
Okay, how do you see Indonesia's economic endurance among all the global issues such as global recession and stagflation until the end of 2022?
Yeah, so one important factor for Indonesia's economy is that it's very domestically oriented. The economy relies a lot on private domestic consumption, the services sector as well, in terms of driving the economic growth momentum, which means that it is somewhat sheltered from the global economic slowdown that is beginning to get underway out of the US, Europe, China as well to some extent. This means that we anticipate fairly resilient growth out of Indonesia. Indeed, this year we're projecting 5.4%, much more than the medium run average of around 5% for Indonesia. This is on the back of the fairly resilient economic recovery that we're seeing post-COVID out of Indonesia, consumers going back out to spend. However, there's a couple of factors that are going to slow down the growth momentum over the next few months. We expect the weaker global growth to slow down the external demand for Indonesia's exports. We also expect some slowdown in consumer momentum once the recovery phase matures. On top of that, of course, we have normalizing monetary policy and higher prices, which will also slow consumer sentiment somewhat. So as a result, we expect 5% growth in 2023, down from 5.4% this year.
Okay, and based on inflation rate in United States, the Federal Reserve might still be hawkish to reach their target in 2%. What is your projection for the Fed fund rates in the last 3 months of 2022?
Yeah, no, that is a really important question. Certainly for us out here in Asia Pacific as well, our central banks are closely watching what the Fed is doing in terms of the influence that has not only on global monetary policy but also on capital flow pressures as well. The current U.S. Fed funds rate is at 3% to 3.25%. So if we take the floor of that, that's about 3%. In the next meeting, market expectations are for either a 50 basis point hike to 350 or a 75 basis point hike to 375, which will take it through the end of the year. So we anticipate about a 2/3 probability of 75 basis point rate hikes, so 375. We expect the Fed funds rate to peak at about 4 to 4.25 next year, which will be the top of the rate in the current cycle. But we certainly anticipate that the risks are tilted to the upside on those numbers, and we could see even further rate hikes out of the Fed if core inflation does not moderate. So specifically for the November meeting, 50 basis points, 75 basis points, 75 basis points, much more likely.